Thanks, Cormac. Minister, I think the chaos landed on hundreds of thousands of passengers of Ryanair over the past week is really a case of chickens coming home to roost. The so-called magic of Ryanair and Michael O'Leary exposed as nothing more than the vulgar, vicious boot boy tactics of vicious exploitation meted out on their crew and on their pilots. Now, I'm not going to repeat the stories which people are familiar with from the airwaves. The charging of pilots €15 an hour to download an application form, €30,000 to pay for their own training, and Ryanair taking on people with a couple of hundred hours training experience. Is it any wonder people are leaving them in droves? And is it any wonder that they're getting away with it because they're facilitated by the operation of the state in this country? Now, given the enormous safety risk for passengers of having pilots on zero-hour contracts, what I want to know from you is what are you doing in terms of tightening up the regulation in this area and improving collective bargaining? Ryanair carries 131 million passengers, employs tens of thousands of people under an Irish flag of convenience. The scam has been perpetuated, the myth, if you like, by the pretence that crew which are based all over Europe are Irish crew on Irish contracts with only recourse to the Irish courts. That's why they get away with it, because Ireland has no definition of what a self-employed person is, and therefore we have agencies like Brookfield, a tax haven in Gibraltar, which contract stipulates that the services of the pilot are provided on a required and/or casual basis. There is no obligation for them to provide work. The European Cockpit Association blames these contracts for risks and for pilots turning up when they're sick, when it's not safe for them to do so. The European Court of Justice, Minister, has blocked this. Ryanair are going to appeal. I want to know what your government's attitude is with regard to this, because Ireland has for too long facilitated this appalling vista.
Yes, I'd like to thank Deputy Daly and Deputy Barry for raising this very important and very topical matter, which is to discuss the recent crisis and the paying conditions for pilots at Ryanair. The ongoing events affecting Ryanair flights across Europe, and especially those affecting Irish travellers, are deeply regrettable. It is a very serious pan-European service failing, and one that seems to have happened at very short notice. The scale of the Ryanair network has certainly exacerbated the impact. There is some solace in EU consumer protection provisions, which in Ireland are safeguarded by the Commission for Aviation Regulation. As the designated national enforcement body in relation to the enforcement of air passenger rights under Regulation No. 261/2004, I can assure the deputies that as soon as the announcements were made by Ryanair, our aviation regulator was onto the company to make sure consumer protection issues were to the fore. I am advised that those contacts are ongoing. The regulator has confirmed that under EU consumer protections, the carrier is obligated to reroute passengers at the earliest possible opportunity and to provide care and assistance, specifically meals and refreshments, hotel accommodation in cases where an overnight stay becomes necessary, transport between the airport and place of accommodation, and 2 telephone calls, emails, faxes or telexes. The airline must also offer the choice of a full refund. These are steadfast requirements which Ryanair will have to comply with for all of its affected customers in Ireland. I understand that the regulator has already advised affected customers to submit claims for refunds and compensation directly to the airline in the first instance. If consumers are not satisfied with the response of Ryanair, they may make a complaint to the regulator in cases where the cancelled flight was from Ireland. Similarly, if a flight was due to depart from another EU member state, the complaint will be handled by the national enforcement body in that member state. Further information is available on the regulator's website, www.flightrights.ie. As to the causes of this disruption, that is a matter for Ryanair to clarify and explain, and I have no wish to speculate as to the inner workings of a private company. I note that a number of factors have been attributed by the company, including adverse weather conditions. However, insofar as the company has pointed to changes to EU regulations affecting leave arrangement for staff as a factor, I can advise the following. the Irish Aviation Authority is the independent regulator in Ireland responsible for safety regulation, oversight and inspection. In this role, the IAA is responsible for ensuring that all Irish registered airlines comply with European aviation safety regulations, including those governing so-called flight time limitations. Revised European flight time limitations came into effect last year, and Ryanair has transitioned to these. The limitations restrict the number of pilot and cabin crew hours that are permissible during a 12-month period. I am advised by the IAA that all Irish airlines have always and continue to be fully compliant with the regulations governing flight time limitations. While I appreciate that the deputies would very much like to instigate a broader debate on pay and conditions of workers, we are talking about a private commercial company here. I have no remit in this regard. Matters of staff rosters, remuneration rates and terms and conditions of employment are a matter for the company and its employees. As I have explained, there are EU laws limiting annual flight times by pilots and crew, and I understand that Ryanair complies with these.
Deputy Daly has 1 minute.
Thanks, I appreciate, Minister, that you've recognised the seriousness of the issue, and I agree with you that it's Ryanair that are primarily responsible, and they will pay a heavy price for their treachery. It is a case of the chickens coming home to roost, and there is never a better time for pilots at Ryanair now to organise. I'm shocked when I think back that it's nearly 20 years ago that we stood outside the White House, the Ryanair headquarters at Dublin Airport, to watch Michael O'Leary give the finger to trade unionists who assembled in support of Ryanair workers' right to organise. But what I am asking you is not the things that you can't control, but the things that you can. Your government has facilitated a process, and indeed the one before you, where employment regulation, or rather lack of regulation in Ireland, has facilitated a European-wide situation where bases of Ryanair have been shut down in France and in Denmark, and people employed on Irish contracts, bogus self-employed Irish contracts. We have a responsibility to that end. We have a responsibility in the ECJ where Ryanair are going to appeal that. And what I want to know is, in the interests of decent workers' rights, safe pilot conditions, what are you doing in order to protect that scenario?
Thank you.